Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadha, Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadha, Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri turn the camera on and left. It's off and away.
Yeah.
Well, nice to see you all again.
Nice to see
Hey,
you.
how are you?
Good.
Good to see you also. Okay. So, let's see. It's kind of interesting. Raj Mahangu asked me to do this some weeks back, and I tell you, I disagreed, as I always do, without thinking about it. And I said to him, oh, what am I speaking about? And this morning he sent it to me. I think he might have sent it to me before, but I didn't see it. And it's really interesting because just yesterday I was reading, believe it or not, I do read. It's kind of an important part of our devotional process. So I'll tell you the topics, just so we know where we're going with this. Brahminical culture and ethics, how to be a Brahmana in modern times. New York City, rough place, dog eat dog world, the importance of cleanliness, a detailed study of Srila Prabhupada's mood of worship and why it's important. So I don't know about a detailed study, but we can talk about some of that, but I want to speak a little bit about Brahminical culture, etc., especially in the modern environment. Even we find in places like India, Brahminical culture is dying, for sure. And one of the main reasons it's dying is because they don't preach. And Prabhupada would say this regularly, that if people aren't developing a taste for hearing and chanting, he says it's the fault of the preachers. He said this is why Christianity is failing, because they don't preach. And they're not active in spreading the mission. So this is why ISKCON is hugely successful, is because in ISKCON there is preaching spirit. And what's that statement from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur? Pranachi Yahe Hetu Vachan, wherever it is preaching is life. And this is one of the things that's very dominant in ISKCON, much more so than you'll see in other religious organizations, and even within other branches of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. That because preaching is so active in ISKCON, therefore people are coming to religious life. They're actually making an effort to change their life. Whereas you see, like what's happening in most parts of the world is everything is just gradually degrading. Burijanbu, he's done that. His Bhagavatam overview. It eventually has become that book. What is it? Unveiling the Lotus Feet and the backward glance and whatever the different books he's got. So he was giving a commentary on the first canto, 17th chapter, I think verses about 36 to 42. And there he was discussing the nature of Kali and how in Kali Yuga, meat-eating, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling are becoming more and more prominent. And as these things become more and more prominent, then you find that honesty, austerity, mercy, and purity are diminishing. And to the degree that they are diminishing, then you'll find these other activities becoming more prominent because they're directly connected to each other. Just like meat eating, killing animals is directly connected to what? Mercy. You have no compassion. How can you kill a living entity if you have compassion? Not possible. And then, illicit sex is connected to austerity. It's also connected to intoxication.
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness, yeah. It's very much connected to cleanliness. When there's lack of purity, when there's excess in illicit sex, then purity is affected. We find that especially in these big cities, very difficult to maintain purity. Very, very difficult. So it means you have to work very, very hard. It's just like, if say for instance, if you left a mirror sitting in this room, right, on the floor, face up, closed the room, went away for a month, you come back, what would you see?
Dust.
There'd be dust on the mirror. It's just the nature of this world. It's like you have to push back constantly against the influence of the material nature, because her influence is to this was the Prakapika Shakti. She just covers everything over. And so at some point you can't see anything. There's no recognition in Vedic culture. And also we see in Vedic culture, there's very much a the concept of controlling the senses, restricting the desires to want to enjoy material nature. But we see also in the modern society, there's very much this push to, well, let me do my own thing, let me experience life. Don't try to repress me, don't try to control me. I was on a bus in Paris the day before yesterday, and there was this young woman there. She was just going off. From my observation, she was behaving quite rudely. And there was an older gentleman, probably in his 70s or 80s. He wasn't dealing with it at all, because obviously he's come from a background of like sense control, restriction. I know with my mother-in-law, I spent a bit of time with her over the years. She passed away now, but she came from an era where people tolerated things, where they didn't protest and stuff like that. Whereas you can see like the modern generation is very different. And so anyhow, this guy, this older gentleman, he was obviously coming from a similar background. And so when this girl was just being really loud and rude on the bus, and he was speaking out quite strongly against her. I mean, I couldn't understand what they were saying because it was all in French, but I got the gist of it because of just the mood. And she was just being rude and disrespectful, basically. Just making fun of him, and he was, not dealing with it at all. And you see, this is the way it's going in this modern world. And Vedic culture is the opposite of what this modern life is about. It's like, it's really, the modern culture is very much focused on enjoying the senses to the max. And so therefore we'll see, as Kali Yuga progresses and as we have devotees joining various temples, etc., they're going to have many more challenges. And also you see what's happening, because in Vedic culture, we know the three modes of material nature. What mode of material nature is the Vedic culture promoting? Goodness. We see here in a place like New York, what are the dominant modes of nature?
Passion, ignorance.
Passion and ignorance. Lots of ignorance, especially around Brooklyn. How do you know there's ignorance around? Park in the dirt.
Liquor shops.
Liquor shops. Smoke shops.
Liquor shops. That's Raja. But a lot of crazy people. Yeah? Madness is the result. Maybe I'll put it on here.
Yeah.
Madness is a result of mode of ignorance. Whenever you see there's lots of crazy people, you can understand mode of ignorance is quite prominent. And we're seeing as Kali Yuga progresses, more and more psychologically disturbed people. They go through traumas as children, they get beaten by their father, beaten by their mother, or they see a murder in the family, or some heavy violence in the family, or there's drug taking in the family, or whatever. I mean, Kali Yuga is such a difficult time. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get more and more difficult as we go on. This is why this Krishna conscious movement is so important. It's the only thing that can save people. There's nothing else in this world. There's no amount of arrangements by the government passing this law and that law and this, whatever they come up with. It's not going to change the situation one bit, because people will still suffer, people will still struggle, and people will still become afflicted by all these difficulties in Kali. And just the nature of Kali, you see how, like, if you look back in the Mahabharata, and I'm sure we're all familiar with the history of the Mahabharata, how you see great devotees like Bhishma Dev, for instance, very, very powerful Kshatriya. Yeah? There's one point during the battle, he was fighting with Arjuna. This is before the battle of Kurukshetra. He's fighting with Arjuna, right? Arjuna's firing arrows at Bhishma. The arrows are going right through his body and disappearing into the earth. And Bhishma just shakes his head and keeps going. I get a cut in my finger, I'm just about ready to cry. You know, so it's a very different, and because the nature of the bodies, they're losing their vitality. You know, people are getting horrific diseases. I remember when I was a child, there was a friend of my relatives who got cancer. He was 35 years old, and it was unheard of that someone so young would get cancer. Now, babies are born with cancer. So it's just evidence how everything is just degrading in Kali, and that's the nature of this age. Everything is just degrading. So through Krishna consciousness, we can turn back the tide of Kali to some extent. It won't stop it. It won't stop it because it's meant to go forward. It's meant to do that. But for the next, 10,000 years, there is some possibility of reducing the effect of the age of Kali. There's a few really interesting verses here I want to read, because this really focuses in on the Brahminical culture. So this is 5.5.21 through to about 24 or 5, I think. I won't read the Sanskrit, because it will take time. Of the two energies manifest, this is Rishabh Dev, he's preaching to his sons. He and his sons went on tour, and he came upon this gathering of Brahmanas. So that Rishabh Dev thought, okay, this would be a nice spot to sit and speak the absolute truth to my sons. So he had 100 sons, and there was a gathering of Brahmanas there. And so he's just speaking to them. And he's just told them to accept Bharat as their guide. Bharat was his eldest son, who later became Bharat Maharaj, and he was the one who was, became Jan Bharat eventually. Yeah? So, of the two energies manifest, spirit and dull matter, beings possessing living force, vegetables, grass, trees and plants, are superior to dull matter, stone, earth, etc. Superior to non-moving plants and vegetables are worms and snakes, which can move. Superior to worms and snakes are animals that have developed intelligence. Superior to animals are human beings, and superior to human beings are ghosts, because they have no material body. Interesting, isn't it? Ghosts are superior. Superior to ghosts are the Gandharvas, and superior to them are the Siddhas. Superior to the Siddhas are the Kinnaras. Kinnaras are like Hanuman monkeys. They're a type, they look like monkeys, they're not really monkeys. And superior to them are the Asuras. Also very interesting. Superior to the Asuras are the demigods, and of the demigods, Indra, the king of heaven, is the supreme. Superior to Indra are the direct sons of Lord Brahma, sons like King Daksha, and supreme among Brahma's sons is Lord Shiva. Since Lord Shiva is the son of Lord Brahma, Brahma is considered superior, for Brahma is also subordinate to me, the supreme personal Godhead. Because I'm inclined to the Brahmanas are best of all. But don't think just because you have a Brahman thread that you're superior to Lord Vishnu. It takes some degree of cultivation. In this verse, the Brahmanas are given a position superior to that of the Supreme Lord. The idea is that the government should be conducted under the guidance of the Brahmanas. So this is an important point. It's like society is going to hell, basically. Why? Because the people who are running the country are not qualified. Just like here, you've got an election coming up next month, so it's kind of an interesting time. And it's like being broadcast, I don't know if it's the same here, but it's being broadcast all over the world.
Oh, yeah.
The election, you're like, there's a devotee we know in London, he works for YouTube. And when they had that election debate on the other day, that they were struggling to keep the service from crashing. Because it was just the demand in England was so big to watch this debate. But the thing is, you have these people, they're just up there, they're promoting these policies, which is just, what's the foundation? What are they basing these policies on? Certainly not religious principles. Basically, the policies are based on whatever they think they'll get the most votes for. And who's voting? Highly qualified people? Brahmanas? Kshatriyas? No, they're all Sudras or less. So you have Sudras voting for other Sudras. So what do you wind up with? A government of Sudras. And therefore, there's no quality in that government. So Prabhupada is saying the idea is that the government should be conducted under the guidance of Brahmanas. Although Rishabh, so this also indicates to us the to some extent what a Brahmana is. A Brahmana is one who actually knows Brahman. That's what it means. If you have the role of a Brahmana, you should understand who is the Supreme Person of God and how to serve him. Although Rishabdev recommended his eldest son Bharat as emperor of the earth, he still had to follow the instructions of the Brahmanas in order to govern the world perfectly. So you see, like the government now, they don't follow anyone's advice. They just do whatever they think they should do. Whereas we see in the Vedic culture, they would follow the Brahmanas because the Brahmanas understood Brahman. The Lord is worshipped as Brahmanya Deva. The Lord is very fond of devotees or Brahmanas. This does not refer to so-called caste Brahmanas, but to qualified Brahmana. A Brahmana should be qualified with the 8 qualities mentioned in text 24, which we'll read in a minute, such as Shama, Dhamma, Satya, and Diksha. The Brahmanas should always be worshipped, and under their guidance, the ruler should discharge his duty and rule the citizens. Unfortunately, in this age of Kali, the executive is not selected by very intelligent people. They're not very intelligent at all. It's just, like, I know what was going on before is previously they had this other president, but he stepped down because they're telling him, oh no, if you run, we won't get the votes. It's all about votes. It's all it's about. It's not about who's qualified to run the kingdom, who's going to guide people to the religious path. It's just who's going to get the most votes, so we can stay in office for another 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is. And then Prabhu says, unfortunately, in this age of Kali, the executive is not elected by very intelligent people, nor is he guided by qualified Brahmanas. Consequently, chaos results. Isn't that what we experienced? Isn't it so chaotic? Just even like at the airport, like I had some interesting experiences at the airports in the last 24 hours. It was like we go to Charles de Gaulle in Paris, and it's just like, my gosh, it's so badly organised there. And then we go to Heathrow, and it's like they have this whole thing like you've got this little like jar of jam in my bag. And like these things just normally just they don't take any notice of, but they're stopping everyone and pulling out everyone's bag. But there's one person there to do it all, so it's taking forever. And then we get to JFK, and there's like 400 people standing in line to go through immigration, and there's 2 people there. And it's like they think they're so intelligent, they think they're managing the society so well, but they're creating so much inconvenience for people. And this is not a cultural society. In a cultural society, you facilitate people's growth in Krishna consciousness. But the modern society is the opposite. It's just completely the opposite. And chaos results. The mass of people should be educated in Krishna consciousness, so that according to the democratic process, they can select a first-class devotee like Bharat Maharaj to lead the order. So Prabhupada's, he's not speaking against the democratic process there. He's saying if you educate people, they'll be able to elect the proper citizen, the proper leader. And because they're not educated, that's why he criticized the democratic process, because people are unqualified to make a choice. And that's why Brahminical culture is important, is because in Brahminical culture, one of the symptoms of Brahminical culture, or the mode of goodness, is illumination. Illumination means you see things as they are. There was that verse, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Para, Vashanti Surya Divya Chakravita. Tad Vipraso, so just as the wise and learned Brahman, just as people that can see the sun in the sky. So the wise and learned Brahmas, they can see the abode of the Lord. And not only that can they see, but because of their Brahminical vision, they're able to enable others to see that abode as well. So that's why Brahminical culture is important, is because they educate people. And they don't educate them in technology. They don't educate them how to build bridges or how to make computers or how to whatever. How to cut up mice in a laboratory or whatever, stuff like that. They educate them in the principles of God consciousness. And that's what a Brahmin is meant to do. If the head of state is headed by qualified Brahmins, everything is completely perfect. And so this is great lacking in this world right now. So it talks about the evolutionary process. I'll just read on. There's some interesting other interesting comments that they're not directly on Brahminical culture. This is verse 23, I think. Yeah, 23. O respectful Brahmana, as far as I'm concerned, no one is equal to or superior, to the Brahmanas in this world. I do not find anyone comparable to them. So this is God himself is saying this. He doesn't find anyone comparable to the Brahmana. So what does that tell us about a Brahmana? Not much. What does it tell us about a Brahmana? What sort of qualifications should they have? A mantra? A thread? Huh?
Samadama. Samadama.
That's the start. Yeah, they have to be very, the point is, at least what I get from this, they have to be very qualified, very fixed in the process of Krishna consciousness. Very, very fixed. When people know my motive after performing rituals according to Vedic principles, they offer food to me with faith and love through the mouth of a Brahmana. When food is thus offered unto me, I eat with full satisfaction. Indeed, I derive more pleasure from food offered in that way than from the food offered in the sacrificial fire. So Krishna is saying, when you feed a pure Brahmana, he's very satisfied with that. He says here, I eat with full satisfaction. So he's completely satisfied when you serve the devotees. But it's also giving us a really good example. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's setting an example, is that he's satisfied when the devotees are served. So we also need to cultivate that mood of rather than just trying to serve myself, is I should serve the devotees, because then Krishna becomes satisfied. And there's a little bit more in this purport also. According to the Vedic system, after the sacrificial ceremony, the Brahmanas are invited to eat the remnants of the offered food. When the Brahmanas eat the food, it is to be considered directly eaten by the Supreme Lord. This is with this concept of Brahman and Bhojan. You feed the Brahmanas, you feed God. Thus, no one can be compared to qualified Brahmanas. And Prabhupada makes that point, qualified Brahmanas. The perfection of evolution is to be situated on a Brahminical platform. Any civilization not based on Brahminical culture or guided by Brahmanas is certainly a condemned civilization. So essentially Prabhupada is saying that every civilization in the world is condemned, because we don't see any civilization that is based on Brahminical culture or guided by Brahmanas, not in this present age. Not even in India do we see that. Present human civilization is based on sense gratification, and consequently more and more people are becoming addicted to different types of things. And we see that. Just all you have to do is just go out the front door. And we see that people are addicted to all types of intoxication, all kinds of illicit sex, all kinds of sense gratification. And just I saw something that there's a new thing that they have out now where they have these bottles of gas and they sniff them or something. I saw them being sold somewhere. It was quite open. It seems like they sniff this gas or they inhale this gas or something and it gives them some kind of euphoric feeling or something. And it's legal. And it's just, there's just more and more stuff coming up. Like when this vaping first started happening, I was in Leicester and Merlin, when I parked the car down the road, and there's the car park was just littered with these little bottles. And I asked Merlin, I said, what's that? So they're vaping. They're just everywhere. And it's just like, people are just so addicted to trying to enjoy the sense. But the thing is, they try and they try and they try, but they're never satisfied. Because they keep trying. Because if you're satisfied, if you achieve full, it's just like when you have the Sunday feast here, you eat the full feast, right? Up to the neck, fully satisfied. Don't want anything else. If you're not satisfied, the body tells you to keep eating, keep eating, keep eating. So we see in the material world, people are not satisfied because they keep taking more and more and more gratification. No one respects Brahminical culture. Demonic civilization is attached to ugra karma. Horrible activities and big industries are created to satisfy unfathomable lusty desires. That's just the nature. Consequently, people are greatly harassed by governmental taxation. The people are irreligious and do not perform the sacrifices recommended in the Bhagavad Gita, Yagya Bhavati Pajanya. By the performance of sacrifice, cloud form and rain falls. Due to sufficient rainfall, for sufficient production of food, guided by the Brahmas, society should follow the principles of Bhagavad Gita, and then people will become happy. And this is part of what it means to have Brahminical culture, is that people become satisfied because they're guided on the path of religious life. So, what does it mean to be a Brahmin? Does it mean you have a Brahmin thread? Does it mean you have a mantra? Is that enough?
You be fixed. Fixed on.
Fixed is one thing, yeah. That's a symptom of goodness is kutashta, is to be fixed in determination. So that's what part of it is to be constant in your consciousness, fixed in consciousness, fixed on the Supreme Personality. What else does it mean? In this verse, let me just go back up to the verse. Is this the verse or is the next verse? Not the next verse. One of the verses here. Yeah, the next verse is what? Huh?
Just like in the verse, it means you can, not just as one sees the sun shining in the sky, you can see the supreme reward of the Lord and give that to others.
Yeah, so the transcendental knowledge is a really important aspect of it. I'll read the next verse. Maybe I'll read the Sanskrit as well. Brita Chana Ushati Me Purani, Yene Hasakam Paramam Pavitram. So this is really interesting. Paramam Pavitram. What does that mean?
Supreme pure.
Huh?
Supremely pure.
Supremely pure, yeah. This Paramam Pavitram. And similar we see in that verse in the Gita. What's that?
Satam Vishuddham.
No, that's that Bhagavatam. Where he talks about this Pavitram Paramam Brahman.
Rajvidya,
Pavitram.
Yeah, Raja Vidya Raja Pavitram Paramam Brahman. He's talking about his supremely pure nature. So saying, Rishabh Dev is saying the same thing about the Brahmanas. He said, Yene he sapam paramam pavitram, shavodama satam anugrahas, cha tapas tatikshanu bhavas chayatra. So he said in the translation, the Vedas are my eternal transcendental sound incarnation. So, the Vedas, eternal transcendental sound incarnation. Therefore, the Vedas are Shabda Brahman. They're transcendental. In this world, the Brahmanas thoroughly study all the Vedas. And because they assimilate the Vedic conclusions, they are also considered to be the Vedas personified. So, and this is mentioned first, so this is a really important point, is a Brahmana knows Brahman. And how do you know Brahman? Just by sitting down and going, oh, or something like that? No. You actually have to study the Veda. Now, in the Veda, in this day and age, the Veda is not so easy to study. So what do we study? That book which is the fruit, the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, Srimad Bhagavatam. So by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can come to understand the absolute truth. So, one of the points you were asking was about how to be a Brahmana in a place like New York City. One of the first things we can do is to study the scriptures, especially Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Nectar of Devotion, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because we see that it's described by sages, I think, or is it Sutta or something? Sutta or something says how the Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge. So it's just like you can get kacha fruit, you eat some sort of kacha fruit, especially something like a mango, you try to eat that when it's raw. It's not very tasty, it's very palatable. But you get one that's paka, that is very, very ripened, and it's very tasty. Or like me, I like avocados. If you try to eat a raw avocado, not very tasty. If you eat a ripe avocado, very, very tasty. And so the Bhagavatam is like already the Vedas are quite sweet and relishable. But the Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, the cream of Vedic wisdom is described. So by studying the Bhagavatam, we can come to know the Supreme Personality. Because we see in not just him, but also his whole creation, all the things all the Supreme Lord does. Because we see in the beginning of the 10th chapter, or is it 9th chapter of the second canto? I think it's the 10th chapter, the first 3 verses first 2 verses, describe the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. Now I don't remember the verse exactly, but it talks about primary creation, secondary creation, how the Lord protects his devotees, the Supreme Personality of God himself, the different incarnations, describes all these things in great detail. So by studying the Bhagavatam, because all Mahapuranas have those 10 topics. So when you study the Bhagavatam as a Mahapurana, you'll understand all these different topics. You'll understand the aspects of Sambandha, Abhidaya, Prayojana. And this is the content of all the Vedic literatures. Yeah? So the Brahmanas are considered to be the Vedas personified. So this is the first thing. It's like whenever a Brahmana, someone who's actually a Brahmana, whenever they speak, we should be understanding what they're presenting is the absolute truth. So like sometimes you might attend a class and someone will say something in class and you think, where did they get that from? That's brilliant. I never heard that before. So it means that if we're going to be speaking philosophy, we need to understand what the philosophy is, and that can only come about by hearing. And there's an interesting purport in the 5th chapter of the first canto where Prabhupada talks about that, and he mentions how hearing the philosophy, speaking the philosophy, how it's very, very important. The Brahmanas should be doing that. The Brahmanas are situated in the supreme transcendental mode of nature, sattva guna. So we can also analyze our own activities, how we're acting in this material world, how we respond to certain stimulus. I'll give you an example. I think you probably know this example quite well. That nasty toilet story. Prabhupada was on a morning walk in Blackpool, and he came upon this toilet that was unclean. It was a toilet that the workers were using, and it was overflowing. Stool urine was just flowing out because they're used to passing stool in the field. They don't know how these things work. And so Prabhupada was really upset about that, and he was chastising the managers. And when one of the managers turned up, just Prabhupada was chastising the others. There was a Chutananda Swami, and he turned to a Chutananda Swami and he said, this is in the mode of ignorance, and because you're in the mode of ignorance, you do nothing. And then in the Bhagavatam class that morning, he elaborated on the same point. And he gave the analogy. It's just like if you have acid and you mix it with an acid, what happens? Nothing. There's no reaction. But if you mix acid with alkaline, what happens? There's a reaction. So in the same way, if we come to something that's in the mode of goodness and we are in the mode of goodness, what's our reaction? We're pleased. We're happy to be there. But if we come to a situation that's in the mode of ignorance, we feel quite repulsed. So I was reflecting this morning on how to actually present this class. So I thought maybe we should just come down with a whole lot of buckets and mops and hand them out. So this is your class on political culture. Get out there and start cleaning. Because for a Brahmana or someone who's trying to be a Brahmana to come into an environment that's not clean is very kind of uncomfortable. It's very like, you almost don't want to be there. It's like, it's like sometimes you might go somewhere and there's a really bad smell. Some people find it quite, like, you go, I know, has anyone here ever been to a butcher shop or something like that? Pretty bad smell, isn't it? But you'll find there's people who are working in that environment, they like it. Or there's another interesting story. It was told by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples. They went to Burma, Myanmar, and they were preaching there. And so they were cooking their prasad, and they were cooking ghee. All the villagers were complaining, what's that horrible smell? What are you cooking? They found the ghee very repulsive. At least for me, when I smell ghee cooking, it's quite a nice fragrance, like a nutty, sweet smell. And so they found out after some time that the villagers there, they had this really quaint habit of, like, when in front of their houses they had these big earthenware pots with a wooden lid. whenever anything died in the village, this is at their front door. Whenever anything died in the village, like a dog or a cat or a bird or whatever, they put it in the pot, they put a lid on it. Right? And naturally these things, they would, the bacteria would get in there and start to ferment. And quite, from our perspective, at least a disgusting smell. But that's not it, that's not all. Whenever they have a festival in the village, like whatever the big festivals were, then they would get this pot and they would scoop all their stuff out and they put that on top of whatever they're eating. So this is considered to be a very palatable condiment. So you can see, but that's because of the mode of nature they're affected by. They find that very palatable. But because you're affected by a different mode of nature, just like, you look at crows, especially you go to places like Calcutta or Delhi or whatever, they have these big rubbish dumps. And it's describing rubbish dump. It's like the place of pilgrimage for crows. The rubbish dump. They all go there and they relish it. You look at some of the stuff they're eating, oh my God, I feel like being sick, It's just so disgusting to watch what they're eating. But it's kind of good to see these things because then we can start to understand the influence of the different modes of nature. These are very rajasic and tamasic places. And if you're attracted to this, then you can understand what mode of nature you're in. If you're not repulsed by this, you can understand what mode of nature you're influenced by. And this is like Lord Rishabh was talking here about how the Brahmanas are situated in the supreme transcendental mode of nature, Sattva. So when they see things that are in the mode of lower mode, especially passion and ignorance, then they're disturbed by that. But not necessarily they'll be disturbed and just turn away and don't want to. No, they try to rectify through preaching, through association, through, especially giving transcendental knowledge. They try to rectify it. And so if we are to cultivate as Brahmanas, cultivate our awareness or consciousness as Brahmanas, we also need to be the same. But not necessarily that we just point the finger at things and don't do anything about it. No, the best way is to set the practical example. And we see that, Prabhupada would do the same. One time, I think this was in San Francisco or something like that, he was giving class and one of his disciples was cleaning the floor, but she was upset about something, so she wasn't doing a very good job. So Prabhupada apparently got down off the speaker's asana, got down on the floor and showed her how to clean the floor. Example speaks louder than precept. And so if we set the example in our own lives of how to live a life in the mode of goodness, then others will be influenced by that. But also, it will help us as well, because we are purifying our existence as well by these activities in the mode of goodness, by living a life in the mode of goodness, we become more purified. And then ultimately, you get to the point where we remove all vestiges of material conditioning, and we become situated in this Vishuddha Shakti, or the transcendental mode, which is what he's talking about here, the situation, the supreme transcendental mode of nature. So obviously it's the Sagu Ansiddhata, Samadhita, transcendental modes of nature. Because of this, and this is really important, because we're looking to try to control the mind and the senses, but if you're influenced by the lower modes of nature, you cannot do it. If you're influenced by passion or ignorance, you cannot control the mind, you cannot control the senses. Just not possible. So Rishabh Dev is saying, because of this, they are fixed in mind control, shama, sense control, dhamma, and truthfulness, satya. Same thing, sama dhamma taposa cham, that Krishna says in the Gita. He talks about the different qualities of the Brahmana. And it's really interesting because you look in the Gita, when Krishna is talking about the Vaishyas and the Shudras, he talks about activities. When he talks about Kshatriyas and Brahmanas, he talks about qualities. So, just because someone does deity worship doesn't mean they're a Brahmana, because also the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas would do deity worship. He doesn't mention deity worship amongst the qualities of Brahmana. He doesn't mention studying the scriptures amongst the qualities of Brahmana. He says, Sama, Dhamma, Taposo, Cham, Chantire, Ajam, Echa, Gana, Vigana, Mastika, Brahma comes. So peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, honesty, wisdom, religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which a Brahmana works. So you understand something by its quality. Just like a simple example, in here is water. What are the qualities of water? It's clear, it's wet, moves around, it's liquid. If it was solid, what would it be? Ice, not water. You'd have to do something to it to make it water. So you can look at the quality of anything, you know, like this brass. This, I think, is bell metal. Yeah, bell metal. Can it ring? Brass doesn't ring like that. You can tell the qualities of something. You can tell the nature of something by its qualities. That's how you understand anything that's material. Like, you know, if I had one of these made out of plastic, right, it wouldn't do the same as what this is like. It wouldn't amplify sound because there's a limitation. But because this is amplifying sound, we can understand it. It's a microphone. It's what they call a transducer. It converts the movement of the air into electrical signal. So you can understand things by the quality. So in the same way, when someone is situated in the mode of goodness, then Sama, Dhamma, Satya should manifest. If they don't manifest, you can understand they're not situated in the mode of goodness. So if we look at, for instance, mind control, Shama, what does that mean? What does it mean when your mind's controlled? Huh? You're sleeping.
It's on. No. You're not going from here to there.
Not going from here to there.
You're not being pushed under the sway of your suggestions of your mind and senses.
Yeah, you're not led by the mind and senses. It's like when I was a young brahmachari, I was actually a brahmachari once upon a time, about 30 years ago. I remember we'd go out on Sankirtan and then we'd take a break for lunch, obviously, and we'd be sitting in the shopping centre. And when I went just taking lunch, and then we would take lunch from the temple. But I remember just sitting there and watching people in the shopping centre, how they're led by their senses. You know, like, I'm sure it's the same here. I've only been to a few shops here in the US, like I go to Whole Foods and go to things like that. But in the food courts and the shopping centres, they have these, they have all the cake shops and all the veg shops, and they have these big glass front, you know, display cabinets. And they put all these, like, really, at least for non-devotees, tasty looking things. For me, they look quite repulsive. But they put all these, like, tasty treats on display. And you see what happens, you know, husband, wife, family, they're walking down through the shopping centre, and you see, and like, they just follow their eyes. You know? And that's the plan. This is the strategy. They're driven by the senses. They're led around by the senses. But then, also mind control, it also, a part of mind control, a big part of mind control, is like, and this is really how you start to understand where you're at, and I was talking about this just before, is when you have particular stimulus, how do you respond to that stimulus? If you're equal in all situations, whether it's good stimulus or bad stimulus, you know, or pleasant stimulus or agitating stimulus, if you're equal, that means your mind's under control. Because it's easy to keep yourself under control when things are going the way you want them to. But if you get some person who's provoking you, or as we say, when they're pushing your buttons, how do you respond to that? Then you can start to understand where you're at. You can understand by the way you respond to stimulus. So this is a very, very important way of understanding where we're at, being fixed in mind control. And also sense control, because we see the senses never stop. Don't think when you become a pure devotee the senses will stop agitating, because they don't. I'm not saying that from experience, I'm not a pure devotee. But, you know, I can see that, you know, even after, you know, what year is it now? It's 2024. So I've been practicing devotional service for 44 years. And I can see now that the senses are definitely more under control. But it doesn't mean they don't stop. It doesn't mean that I'm not attracted to the objects of senses. I just don't respond. at least I respond a lot less. I wouldn't say I don't respond. I respond a lot less than I used to. But you'll see, for instance, interesting story. Prabhupada told this to Harikesh. Oh, actually, Harikesh was in the room when it happened. So Harikesh, as a brahmachari, was serving Srila Prabhupada, and at various times he went to complain to Prabhupada about the brahmacharis and how they're very, disturbing his mind and things like that. And so Prabhupada, in an effort to encourage him in sense control, was telling him a story about Yudhisthira Maharaj. And so what happened was Krishna was talking with Yudhisthira Maharaj, and he was saying to Yudhisthira, Krishna was saying to Yudhisthira, was like, Kunti was extraordinarily beautiful, just incredibly beautiful, and Krishna was asking Yudhisthira, said, aren't your senses sometimes agitated by your mother's beauty? Because even like we see, like in Kali Yuga, even if the mother or the father or the sister or whatever, very, very attractive, people are, engaged in illicit relationships with their relatives. It's not uncommon in this age. And so Krishna was saying that to Yudhisthira, and Yudhisthira said, I can see she's very, very beautiful, but I do nothing. You just, it's not like the senses just like block out, they don't function anymore. No, obviously you can appreciate that his mother's very beautiful, but understanding relationship, understanding the consequences also of such actions. Because this is also a symptom of goodness, is you observe, okay, this is the pushing that's coming. If I ignore this, what are the results? What's the reaction? What's the end game here? So you look through that. If I respond to this, where's it going to lead? And so, at that point, Prabhupada told this story to Harikesh. Then a life member came into the room with his beautiful young wife. And Prabhupada turned to Harikesh and said, see this woman? I can see she's beautiful. I'm not blind. But what do? I do nothing. And you can imagine what was going on with this young lady. She wants to disappear into the floor kind of thing. But so that's the point. It's like, it's not that the senses stop functioning, because they are senses, and the purpose of the senses is connect with the objects. That's what they do. It's just like a magnet, they're drawn to each other, and so that's just the nature. But for someone who's developing sense control, then the senses still push, but they don't have an effect. It's just like the analogies given in the scriptures. It's like the poisonous snake. When a poisonous snake with fangs, when it bites you, it injects the poison. But if the fangs are broken, and this is what the snake charmers in India do, is they break the fangs of the snake, because the snake is still going to bite them. But if they break the fangs, nothing happens because it can't break the skin. So in the same way, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, the fangs of these serpent-like senses become broken, and even though the senses are still attracted to the objects, that they have no effect. So this is, again, pointing to the importance of the practice of Krishna consciousness. And in Krishna consciousness means like we follow regulated principles, we follow a regulated program. I was reading recently in the Bhakti Rasa Nrsimha, Jiva Goswami's commentary on it, and he's talking about how when one becomes steady in sadhana, and this is helping me to understand the importance of sadhana even more. When we become steady in the practice of sadhana, this is called nishta. Nishta leads to bhava. So by being steady in our practice and steady in our sadhana, we're actually able to conquer the mind and senses. There's some very, very important elements in the devotional process. And of course, truthfulness. This is one of the hallmark qualities of a brahmana, is to be truthful. It's described that a brahmana is so truthful that even if telling the truth could be harmful to them, they'll still tell the truth. There's an interesting story in the 8th canto, the story of Bali Maharaj. So what happened there is he promised to Vamanadev that he would give the land in charity. his guru was saying to him, what's his name? Shukracharya. He was saying, no, he's Vishnu, he'll take everything. He said, no, I've given a promise, I have to stick to my word. And this is one of the reasons he's glorified as the Mahajan, because rather than break his word, he would risk everything, just because that was his vow, he would always be truthful. So this is one of the reasons he's glorified. So similarly for a Brahmana, they should be known by the truthfulness. And that means no little white lies, Well, it doesn't really matter so much. No, Brahmana tells the truth. Because it's Dharma. It's Dharma, it's their Dharma to tell the truth. And it's also, it's what's right religiously, is to tell the truth. Then it goes on to say, they describe the Vedas in their original sense. Also a very important statement. Because you see that many so-called Brahmanas, they give their own interpretation of the Veda. What it means, it's all one, it's this, it's that. But they describe the Vedas in their original sense. And out of mercy, anugraha, they preach the purpose of the Vedas to all conditioned souls. So this is very, very important also. They practice penance, tapasya, and tolerance, tatiksha. Penance can mean different things for different people. Just like we see yogis, they're quite accustomed to, being up to the neck in freezing cold water in the wintertime, or in the summertime they'll sit in the midst of blazing fires and things like that. But, you don't need to do that. Especially not living in a place like New York. Just being here is tapasya. You try to sleep at night, the whole building's shaking as the trains go past in the subway. That's tapasya. It's like, you walk out at the front, you get accosted by some crazy person. That's tapasya. Just the where you have to deal with, in your service you have to deal with, these long lines at the airports, and just like, you can see that as you're traveling about this world. We already have to deal with so much tapasya. Prabhupada, he told Shamasundar one time, he said, when Shamasundar had come running out, Prabhupada was going to water, and Shamasundar came running out without his shoes, and Prabhupada said, where are your shoes? He said, Prabhupada, when I'm with you, I don't need shoes. And Prabhupada said, there's already enough austerities in the material world without inventing any. You don't need to come up with any additional austerity. This material world is austerity, especially for someone who's trying to cultivate the mode of goodness, because this whole material world is in Tama and Raja. So for someone who's trying to cultivate goodness, to be in that environment is really austere. It's really austere. Just spend some time in some area that's dirty, because you're trying to cultivate the mode of goodness. You'll find it's austere. Tatiksha, tolerate, that's that thing also. It's like, like, I had a funny experience. Again, when you travel around, you get lots of interesting experiences, The guy who was sitting in the row in front of me, because the flight was like jam-packed full, there wasn't one single spare seat, and don't we all love flights like that, And like, so, people are like moving bags around, trying to get their bags in the overhead lockers, otherwise it's going to hold the flight up, and they'll have to go onto the plane, etc. And usually have all the valuables in your carry-on, so you're worried about things getting stolen or whatever. And so, like, this guy, he's trying to find some space in the locker, and the guy sitting in the row in front says, "Don't touch my bag." It's like, it's just a bag, for goodness sake. It's not like, it's just like so touchy that as soon as he touched the bag, I thought he was going to kill him, Really aggressive. And so this is showing, because you're influenced by ignorance and passion, no tolerance. No tolerance at all. We see, like, there's one story of Prabhupada, when he was traveling in South Africa, they were in a car accident, and what happened is their car was hit on the side where Prabhupada was sitting. And then they kept, they just, whatever they had to do, but they just, they sorted it out and they kept going. And when they got to their destination, the devotees came and opened the door for Prabhupada, and they noticed his leg was covered in blood from where the door had been pushed in and it hit against his leg and caused cut the skin or something and caused bleeding. Prabhupada didn't say anything about it. It's just a fiction. And Krishna, he makes the same point to Arjuna. Just tells the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress are like the appearance and disappearance of summer winter seasons. They arise from sense perception. This is the thing, it's like all these kind of inconveniences we experience in the world, we're perceiving them through our senses. And one person has one particular set of senses, influenced by the particular modes of nature, they perceive things in one way. Whereas another person has a different set of senses, influenced by different modes of nature, they'll perceive exactly the same thing in a different way. Just like, who here likes cold weather? Anyone? You like cold weather? Can't stand it. I'll flee. You know, I like hot weather. Probably because I was born in Australia and it's a hot place. You know, and therefore I have senses that are adapted to that environment. You're born here in the US and, you know, it's colder here. And so, because the senses you have, you know, and some people, who likes guavas? Anyone? Yeah, he likes guavas. Can't stand them.
Yes.
Can't stand, some fruits I just, you know, like I can eat avocados all day, all night, not a problem. You know? But guavas, can't stand them. Stone fruits, love them. You know? Berries, raspberries, blueberries, things like that, love them. But other things, no. Horse food. Yeah, so we find because of the senses we have, we like some things and we dislike other things. But it's all just sensory perception. Therefore, and also like looking at the temporary nature of this whole material world. You know, just like Krishna saying to Arjuna, Sitoshna Sukha Dukkha. It's like Sita Ushna, that means cold and heat, you know, summer and winter. It's temporary. Like the summer comes and it goes. The winter comes and it goes. So tolerate it. You know? Well, I used to live in a town or a city in Australia called Melbourne. And they have an interesting saying in Melbourne. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, you will. Because it changes so much. But the whole material world's like that. It's constantly changing. You know? And you know, there's no point getting attached to things. You just tolerate because it's just going to change. And you'll see, this is like also one of the things we see with the older generation is they do tend to be more tolerant. The younger generation tend to be less tolerant because they're aspiring for instant gratification. I want gratification, I want it right now. They want to wait. Whereas you'll see the older generation, less and less now, but it used to be much more tolerant than what you see now. Much more tolerant. Yeah. What else have I got to say here? Yeah, they preach the Veda. The purpose of the Vedas to all the conditions. So the purpose of the Vedas. What's the purpose of the Vedas?
Remember Krishna.
Yeah, what does Krishna say? By all the Veda, I am to be known. That's the purpose of the Veda, is to understand Krishna. And that's the purpose of Brahmana, is to help people to understand Krishna, to understand who they are, and to understand who God is, what's their relationship, what's their duty. Very, very important. They practice penance, tapasya, and tolerance, and they realize the position of every living entity and the Supreme Lord. Anubhava. Bhava means the nature. So they realize that their own position. What's our position? Jivera Sarupa Hoy, Krishna Das, Krishna Shakti, we're actually in eternal service of Krishna. That's our business, to serve Krishna, and He is the Supreme Original Personality of God. So this is the purpose of the practice. These are the 8 qualifications of the Brahmanas. Therefore, among all living entities, no one is superior to the Brahmanas. So very, very important verses and protocols there. So what should we do now? Should we do some just discussion, questions, comments, realizations? Nice to see you again, Margie. You're looking well.
I'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah, so will I.
I have a list of questions.
A list?
Yeah, some are from our devotees who couldn't make it because they're in Vaisheshik Prabhu's Vyasa Puja or have some service right now. But one of them was an interesting concept. Was because some people will have, raised this objection that, well, Brahmanas are not supposed to work. So then how can you say in ISKCON that you have Brahmanas, who can do temple service and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I mean, we all have to do some kind of work. Krishna says that even I have to work, otherwise the whole world will go to ruination. So when you're living in an environment like this, like New York City, I mean, I know what it's like in Australia. Like in Australia now, they have what they call a housing affordability crisis. And there's so many people who are living in vans these days and cars and stuff. You go to any like beach headland, like a remote beach headland at night, and Australia's a lot of remote places there because it's a big country and there's only 25, 26 million people. And the whole country's the size of America.
Wow.
You know? And so you go any like beach headland at night, you'll find there's so many cars parked there. When people just sleep in the cars because they can't afford to pay rent. And you know, my understanding here in New York is it's also very, very expensive. You know what it's like. I mean, how much you pay a month for rent?
Too much.
Too much. Too much.
How much is too much?
Enough.
Enough.
Yeah, but that's
And mine's affordable.
Huh?
And mine's affordable, and it's still too much.
Still too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, while I guess there's two ways of looking at it. There's the external, and then there's the internal side of it. The internal side of it is like, are they living their lives as Brahmanas? What is a Brahmana meant to do? A Brahmana is meant to preach. A Brahmana is meant to give others the understanding of who God is. But also, they're meant to internally cultivate the qualities of Brahmana. Now, certainly, the external activities are going to make that easier. If you're living your life in a simple way, if you're, just like for instance, a Brahmana needs to live very simply, not have great expectations, and so I've always been of the view that temples need to try to create an economy so that they can support Brahmanas, but then the Brahmanas need to have simple aspirations, not that they're wanting, like the latest mobile phone every year, or getting brand new laptops every year, or fancy cars. No, they need to be able to live. Obviously, it means also that they need to be able to live a life of dignity, i.e., they can maintain their family. If the children have got school expenses, the children have got dental expenses, they need to be able to cover those costs. Not that they're living in poverty. Although there are examples of Brahmanas living in poverty, but they're quite exemplary devotees. But so if temples can develop that concept of maintaining Brahmanas in a way that is honorable for them, but also the devotees who are trying to cultivate their life as Brahmanas have simple expectations, not opulent expectations. Yet, that's one aspect of it. Ideally temples would do that, but we don't see that happening very often. Some places they do. They maintain devotees, they do live their lives quite simply. But still, I don't see any real contradiction, if you like, between living your life as a Brahmana, for instance, and working a job. Of course, if you're working in a meat packing facility, I think that would be quite a contradiction. You need to try to find some type of work that is compatible with the spiritual consciousness. It's not easy because of the nature of the environment. I mean, I've done a number of, like when I first started in the service of ministry, I was doing paid work just to maintain the service. Because, see, again, there's also another aspect of it. It's like you go and work, right? What do you do with the money? What, do you use it for your sense gratification? Or do you use it for pushing on Krishna consciousness? I think that's also a key. It's just like, it's like the way you look at the activity is what's your approach. Is this so I can enjoy, or is this so I can serve? If that mentality is so I can serve, then that's fine. I think that's very commendable. And you'll see there are many devotees in this life who are engaged as Brahmanas or doing Brahminical seva, and they're working, but they're using the money to support their Krishna consciousness. They're not using the money to buy fancy cars, buy fancy clothes, buy this, buy that, and I don't need to get into any detail, but I think you understand the point there. Like when I first started doing the service, I was doing, paid things to maintain the service, just to get going, but now the service tends to maintain it. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah. Another kind of aspect.
But I know that other people got very different views on it.
Yeah.
That's okay, they're welcome to their opinions.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada had, just like you look here in New York when Prabhupada was in 26th Avenue, Satrup and others were working on it.
Yeah. Same Jaina
And he still gave them Brahmin Diksha.
Yeah.
Jainanda was driving a taxi and gave Brahmin Diksha. So Prabhupada didn't see, from my observation, Prabhupada didn't see a contradiction between the two.
There's another also one someone wanted to ask.
Sure, you want to say something?
Well, I was just.
Use the microphone. Use it. It's
No,
for the
ask.
online. It's for the online.
You've been
Because-
broadcast now.
Uh,
The universe.
Because, just not to harp on this point a little bit more, but I'm going to, is you don't want to take things away from the temple also when you're, a lot of times some temples are struggling, so then you're, like you said, how are you utilizing that money if you are also giving it back to the temple? So many of us living outside of the temple are giving, donations to help maintain the tea department, to help to maintain, sponsorships and things like that. Also, the temple, you decide to have a family, it's the temple's responsibility to maintain that family.
Well, I think it really depends on what the devotee is doing. If they're fully engaged as a brahmana, like say for instance you have someone who's a grihasta, children, whatever, and they're the head pujari. Usually this, in order to do the service effectively, it's basically a full-time service. There's a lot to be done in that service. And so if someone's able to do a service like that as a grihasta, then as a full-time service, then it seems to be reasonable that the temple would be able to give them a, suitable level of maintenance. But maintenance, not a job.
Yeah.
That's the problem. This is one of the challenges that's been there with importing pujaris, say from various countries in Europe and Central Asia and Northern Asia and stuff like that, and also India, is that it winds up becoming a job. I do X amount of things a week, and I get X amount of Lakshmi, and I'm not going to do anything more unless you pay me more. That's the wrong mentality. That's just business. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to cultivate our God consciousness. The purpose is to go back to Godhead and to inspire as many other people as we can along the way to go back to Godhead as well. And if the temples are in the situation where they can maintain such a person who needs maintenance, great. But it's not, like you say, a lot of temples can't afford that. Not many temples in ISKCON. I know there's a few temples like, Bhaktivinoda Manor maintains some. In Mayapur, there's a few, there's not many grihasta pujaris there, but some of the grihastas like Nitai Balaram, he's maintained. Very basic maintenance. It pays their basic needs. He's like, he's not jet setting around the globe or anything like that. So I think, I don't have a problem with it as long as the right mentality is there. And it's not just a job. I really have a problem with this idea of bringing pujaris in, they're maintained. Or not maintained, but they're given a wage. I have a problem with that because then it becomes a job. But also like sometimes temples have had to bring people because they have reasonable income, but they have to bring people in from overseas to continue certain services, and then like the brahmachari is getting maintenance or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, to support his family. I don't have a problem with that, as long as it's not focusing on sense gratification. It's really hard to give like a blanket kind of analysis on it because each situation is unique. And you just have to look at the situation.
One other facet just that came up while I was thinking what you were saying is that oftentimes there comes a situation where it's like, oh no, disaster, we need to import a pujari now. And oftentimes you have to ask, well, why is that? Well, maybe because you have too many deities for your center, or your standard is unrealistically high, or you're not like trying to actively engage the devotees in your community in doing service, so you just think it's easy to pay someone and bring someone over.
Yeah. To me, that seems like a failed strategy.
Right.
If you have to import people, there's something along the line that hasn't worked. Now, having been in ISKCON for a number of decades, I can see that, in the 80s, if you look at during Prabhupada's period, there was a period of quite substantial expansion. And after Prabhupada left in 77, the 11 persons who were entrusted with keeping the society going, they tried to push on in the same way, but the concept was there, because I was there at that time, the concept was there, was that they were like, little Prabhupads. But they weren't. They weren't even close. And so as a result, what happened is a number of them fell down. And so all that expansion that had gone on started to crumble. And then you find that in many places you had these big projects with very, very few devotees still able to manage that, what was started during Prabhupada's times. So there are many scenarios on why we wind up in those different circumstances. But in the ultimate end, I think there's only one real solution. Like importing pujaris is a stopgap solution. Allowing non-Brahmins to engage in worship is not a solution at all. It's just going completely against the standards of the scriptures and the standards of our acharya. To me, that's not a solution. It's not even an option. Although sometimes you get into a situation where there is no other option, but I'm really not in favour of that one at all, because it's just not an option as far as I'm concerned. The only real solution is preaching, book distribution, whatever you do. You just have to somehow or other try to increase the number of devotees, and hopefully the devotees come with the right motive, not that they're getting some kind of material benefit, but that they want to become devotees of Krishna, and they want to give their life to serving Krishna.
How do you also balance that idea that, of course, temples need brahmanas and pujaris, but at the same time, not just like, oh, we need another pujari, so give him initiation, give her initiation.
But Prabhupada did that. When he installed the deities in Sydney, there was practically no brahmanas there, and he had everyone in the temple. There was a few that did, most of the devotees in the temple. They just like some of them had only been there for a very short time. He gave them all Brahmin Diksha. Part A. Part B, he goes before the deities when he leaves. He says, "My dear Lord, I'm leaving you in the hands of these villages. You please train them how to serve you. I cannot help you." I mean, that's extraordinary. That's something Prabhupada could do. But I don't think someone else could do that. But you can see, he did, because he's an acharya, he did set an example that sometimes, not that we change the rules. We can have non-Brahmins. That's not an option. No, the guru needs to take the risk. That's a preacher. They take risk, and Prabhupada says that the preacher takes risks to push on Krishna consciousness. And we see that Prabhupada took substantial risks to push on Krishna consciousness. And in that example, he initiated people who weren't qualified. Some of them are still around, most of them aren't. Paul is still around. He was one of those brothers. And so the guru needs to take risks to push on Krishna consciousness. That's what it means to push on Krishna consciousness in Kali Yuga, is taking risks. Which is say, there's so many devotees who are traveling all around the world. I think these planes, they practically every time we get on the plane, I think this thing could just drop out of the sky. You've got this however many ton hunk of metal flying through the sky. If something goes wrong, it's going to drop like a brick. So taking risks. You get diseases, you get, just everything. It's just, the devotees who are out distributing books. so much risk they're taking. I mean, there's some crazy person who could attack them and stab them, or this happened. So we take risks for putting on Krishna consciousness. We don't change the rules. The rules are given in the Shastra, the rules are given by the Acharyas. We follow what they do. We push on Krishna consciousness, take risks. And that's how you become dear to Krishna, you take risks on his behalf. Not stupid risks. You don't go and Deity into some Muslim country and start calling all hogs, dogs, camels and asses, you're a bunch of eating demons, all that sort of stuff, That's foolish. You could wind up, in a box underground.
Yeah, my question. Is there an age limit or age for one to become a pujari?
Well, old age or young age?
Young to old. Everybody can become old.
Minimum to maximum.
Yeah, the
Minimum to maximum.
the minimum and maximum.
Yeah, there's how old are you now?
Kavaca.
16. You're old enough. Prabhupada in a letter, he said children are not less than 12 years of age can be taught deity worship. One place he says 10 years, they can be taught deity worship. Another place he says children 12 years and older can get initiated and do deity worship. So I take that to understand is when they're 10 you start training them, when they get to 12 then you start engaging them. And as far as what's the maximum age, as long as they're still got their faculties about them, and there's not because see one of the things that happens when you get older with some people, you might have heart issues and stuff, and you can get dizzy spells. Very dangerous if you're pressing the deities. So you've got to look at the safety of the deities also, and of course the safety of the devotee. And also one of the things that's a challenge, especially when we get older, is when you're worshipping deities, you have to go long periods of time without drinking water. And this can cause dizzy spells and things like that. So you need to factor that. But as long as one is healthy and capable, as long as you can be 108 years old, it doesn't matter. There's no limit on age, but you just have to, as long as the capacity is there and the desire, you keep going.
The next question is, who could become a head pujari? How young you could be to become a head pujari?
She could become a head pujari.
Yeah.
As long as she knows what she's doing.
The qualification, one should know what she. The qualification is one should know what she is doing.
Let me see, I'll see if we can find it for you. I've got a head pujari. Service description here. Just to give you an idea. Definition: the head pujari is a member of ISKCON who is appointed by the temple president and/or temple board and is responsible for the overall care and ongoing service of the temple deities. The head pujari is adept in all functions of deity worship and trains the temple pujaris how to properly execute the functions of deity worship. The head pujari is directly answerable to the temple president and/or temple board and the local GBCs, as stated by Srila Prabhupada in the following letter. Pujari should operate entirely under the supervision of temple president and GBC, not independently. Let it agree with under. Anyway, I won't read the whole document, but see, the head pujari is responsible for one thing is selecting pujaris, training pujaris, mentoring pujaris. These three things are very important. So, obviously the head pujari needs to have an understanding of what type of persons are suited to the service, because not everyone's suited to being a pujari. Some people might like to do deity seva. I was having this conversation recently with a senior, it was the temple president, Ekanath Gaur at Radhadesh. And he's saying he likes to do deity seva, but if he was put in there every day, he'd start to find it quite disturbing. Why? Because it's not his nature. He's not influenced. He's not sufficiently in the mode of goodness, for instance, to be able to do that service. So the head pujari has an understanding of what type of devotee is suited to that service. Not everyone will be. So first off, they select, then they train. So that you don't just base the head pujari on they like doing deity worship. It's just like someone might be an expert tradesman in a particular trade, but it doesn't mean they're a businessman. You know, because you see that. So, how many times you see small businesses fail? It's happening all the time. More businesses fail than succeed. Why? Because they may be very good tradespeople, but they're not businessmen. They don't know how to manage a business. So, in the same way, if someone may be a good pujari, but it doesn't mean they're a good head pujari. Right? Because they need to be able to select, they need to be able to train people, you know, in what are appropriate standards of worship. And then once that's done, they need to be able to mentor them to keep them on track. Because we all need mentoring to stay on the devotional path. It's not like, you know, you get initiation, you're on your own. You know, it's not like that. You need to be guided on the devotional path. Everyone needs guidance on the devotional path. And so, you know, that's just some aspects of being a hippie journey. Yeah, we've got a whole document here. It's available on our website also, dworship.com.
Yes. My daughter lives in Houston.
Sorry?
My daughter lives in Houston.
Houston,
In
okay.
Houston, the president there appointed her as head teacher.
Sorry?
The committee in Houston Temple, the president appointed her.
Shava Sunda's still the president there?
No.
Saranga Thakur.
Saranga.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So they appointed her head teacher, and she's young, 34 years old.
How old?
34.
24.
34.
34.
And talking to her, I said, "You sure you want to become head pujari? Do you know what you're going to do? What you know the job qualification? What you know what?" Say, well, I'm going to get training, and I said, "Yes, you certainly you're going to need a lot of training."
Yeah, I mean, obviously a beginning point is enthusiasm or desire to do it, but that's not the only qualification. That's a starting point. You know, one needs to have knowledge, one needs to have you know, mentors to guide you further in the process, and also a good support network. She's got you as a father, that's a good start.
Yeah. She got a lot of training from us.
Definitely, like it's anything you do in the material world, you know, if you have it, like I was relating this in a class in Paris the other day. I remember when I was a child, they have this game in Australia called Australian rules football, and it's kind of unique. There's no other game like it, you know. No other game of football anything like it. Anyhow, but I remember playing it in my neighbourhood amongst my friends, and I used to excel. I used to, jump high, get the marks, and because I felt safe because playing with my friends, there was never any nastiness there. As soon as I got into a competitive environment, when I was playing for a proper team and things like that, very different. And you'll find that a lot of people are very expert in various sports and stuff. When they get into the competitive environment, they tend to crumple because they can't deal with the nastiness that comes along with it. So if you have a good support network, it's much easier to excel in a task than if you don't have that support. Some people are in themselves they're quite strong, but most of us aren't. Most of us need that support. You know, some can find that from within, but that's not easy. Right, you have more questions?
Well, I have unlimited questions. I just want
Unlimited?
to
You
give.
must be Vishnu.
Yeah. I just want to give others a chance.
Anyone else? Ravini, do you have any questions?
Yeah, going back to the working and being a Brahmana, going back to the topic of working and being a Brahmana, some of us have to work, and I wanted to ask how far or how defensive you have to become with your co-workers at work before they start contaminating you.
How what?
Defensive. Defensive. Like,
Defensive.
Defensive.
You have to
Yeah.
defend your Krishna consciousness.
Right.
Okay.
Defend your purity, defend your honesty, defend all your strength, your values.
Well, there was a famous football coach here in America. I can't remember his name, but he said the best defense is a good offense. So I'm not meaning go out and be offensive or anything like that. But what I mean there is that you be very proactive internally with your Krishna consciousness. Maybe you're in an environment where you can also, you know, present Krishna consciousness to your co-workers and stuff. Maybe you're not, but at least be very kind of active within yourself with Krishna. You know, if you don't read, for instance, if you don't rise early, if you don't regularly chant your rounds, then yes, you will be affected by these things. But if you are active in your Krishna consciousness, then you're inoculated against these things. Of course, that doesn't mean, okay, I chant Hare Krishna, I follow four principles, I read Prabhupada's books, therefore I'm going to go to nightclubs, I'll be okay. No, you understand? It will have its effect. So just like, if you fill your cup up with Krishna, there's no room for anything else. So just be always absorbed in Krishna. You know, always Krishna says that. You know, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These the glories they worship with determination. So that's what we need to be like: is to be always engaged in hearing about Krishna, in talking about Krishna, in thinking about Krishna. Then you're protected. Nothing else will protect you. Nothing else can protect you. So just fill yourself up with Krishna and you'll be fine. And just when you're doing your work, you know, you just think, I'm doing it. See, there's a really interesting verse in the 9th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna says, Yad Karoshi Yad Shnasi Yad Jehoshi Dasya Yad Tapashashi Kuntaya Tad Kurush Marapana. He says, always think of me. No, what's that? Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer your way, whatever austerities you do, perform that as son of Kunti as an offering to me. And then in the next verse it says, Suva Pareya Eva Moksha Sanyasa Yoga Vimukha places. He said, with your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and thus you'll come to me. So, and I often, you know, when I'm in Australia, I often have the opportunity to do home programs. And this is a key verse I speak on, because one of the questions you often get from those who are living in the congregation, you know, working etc. like that, is like they tend to see their work life and their devotional life separate. That's a problem. If you see separation between the two, you've got a problem. You need to make it so there's no difference, there's no separation. Your work life, your domestic life, that is your devotional life. Not meaning that you just do work and you forget about Krishna, but you know, it means like you're working for Krishna's pleasure, you're raising a family for Krishna's pleasure, you're interacting with your partner for Krishna's pleasure. If you do everything for Krishna's pleasure, then you're a grihasta in the actual sense of the word, because you're using your griha for Krishna's pleasure, for Krishna's service. And so, whatever you do it for Krishna. You work, you do it for Krishna. How do you do that? You give, like Muslim, you give some of the proceeds for his work to Krishna. Maybe there's, like I said, there's the environment, there's a situation where you could present Krishna consciousness in some way. Maybe you can give books, maybe you can give prasadam. Maybe you can come give some incenses offered to the deities, or, you know, flowers or whatever. There's so many different ways that you can expose people to Krishna consciousness without them thinking you're preaching to them. Because most people are quite sensitive about that. I heard an example the other day, yesterday actually, I was talking to my wife about it. And this person we know was, they're working in an environment, and they were invited to a work function, you know, and it was some kind of meat eating place, and he responded to it, that's against my religion, I can't do that. And so what happened is not too much later, he got one of those, you know, Dear John letters, your service is no longer required. And so because by that response of like saying, oh, it's against my religion, their norms were challenged. They felt quite, you know, confronted by that. You know, and bring the religion thing into it. So the idea would be to be able to present Krishna consciousness in a way that doesn't make people feel confronted. Because as soon as they feel confronted, they want to get rid of you. You're a problem. Especially in a country like this where people are so sensitive. But I saw the same thing in Paris, you know, the day before yesterday, when we were going out right now, is how this young girl was just very insensitive towards this man's needs. And you know, we need to be sensitive to people's needs, because if like when we're out trying to present Krishna consciousness to others, and people perceive us as being insensitive, they're less likely to take the message than if they are when they perceive us as being sensitive and interested. Because like if you look at any living entity, apart from devotees, right? If you look at any living entity, what is their number one most favorite topic? Themselves. There's nothing more interesting to them than themselves. Right? So therefore, we have to try to connect with their needs, interests, and concerns. So if you're going to present Krishna consciousness to people, you need to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just one thing, because at the last you touch about the sensitivity of the people, and if you say, especially here, in New York, people are so sensitive. You try to correct them and teach them the proper way. So that is the last day of your friendship.
Basically.
That's what happens.
But what did Rupa Goswami say? First become Krishna conscious, the rules and regulations come later.
Yeah. But in terms of this deity worship and things, because something has just said, first they need to be trained up, then ask them to go on the
But that's a different thing, because deity worship means rules.
Yeah.
Yeah? So you're entering into a service environment that means rules.
Yeah.
And then people want to tell you the rules,
Yeah.
and you don't like it,
Yeah.
go do some other service.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because we have less manpower here, and people, they say yes before entering the altar, but when they go there and they do their own mental speculation thing, which just harms all the rules and regulations of the Shastra. So how do we balance this?
But I think it depends on what they're doing. I mean, some things don't really matter that much. I mean, when I first started doing this service, I used to do like temple audits, and I used to pick up every little detail. And these days I think, I don't think that's the best way of doing it. Better is you look at the overall picture of what's going on. Just like we do this thing when we're doing the training in Mayapur, or I just did this training in Belgium, and now we're going to do another one in Naperville. And the way I look at it is like, when we give our feedback, we have this process, and you would have learned this in the teacher training course, yeah? It's called oral feedback. So first off, what you do is like, when the person's doing the task, is you write down all the things that you sort of good. And I look for every little detail I can find which is good. And like one thing I was focusing on this time was, I really appreciated they screwed the cat back on the oil. Now it may seem like a small thing, but Hari Sori, he was massaging Prabhupada, and he had a bottle of pure sandalwood oil, and he didn't put the lid back on, he knocked it over. And Prabhupada got his case about it. And then, so you just try to find all these things that, they should be very specific, that they're doing good. It's just like when you're raising children, you catch them doing things right. When you're training someone, you catch them doing things right. You reinforce the behavior you want. But if we're just pointing out the things you don't want, and not giving them the things you do want, you're just giving a negative message. So the best thing is to catch them doing things right. Identify, Prabhu, I really like the way you did Govindaji's turban today. You have the cloth going across like this, the fan on the top, and it just looks so elegant, really. But be honest, there's an interesting letter that Prabhupada wrote to one of his disciples, and you may know this letter, and she had sent him. Prabhupada was traveling with the small Radha Krishna devotees that wound up in Mayapur. They're not there anymore, and the devotee had sent him a dress which was too small. And Prabhupada wrote to her and said, I'm very, very happy to receive this dress. And just the way, I mean, God, if you got this lady, you'd be floating on cloud nine, you'd be so happy. Even though there was a correction, Prabhupada was correcting her in the letter, right? But the way he did it was just so wonderful, so elegant and so sweet, that she would, look, Prabhupada, I'll make the dress any way you want it.
Yeah.
Because she was so encouraged. And this is the thing, it's like when we're giving feedback to someone, the end issue or the end result of that should be encouragement. They feel encouraged to continue. But if all we're giving them is like negative, 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 do it yourself. That's the result. And so we have to be very, and the other thing is also, is it our position to give feedback? That's the key. Is it your position to give feedback, or is it somebody else's position? If it's somebody else's position, maybe help them to see that this needs to be addressed, but don't give it yourself, because otherwise you just become that person who's always pointing out people's faults, and no one likes it. You know? Especially like some things which are kind of personal faults. You don't like people pointing that out because it's, you probably already know about these anarchists, and you don't want to hear about it. But there's a structure. You give positive, then you give, you ask permission. That's one important point. Is you ask them, is it okay if I give you some feedback on some things you might want to improve on? And they give permission. You give them a little bit of feedback. Just identify the most important things, and then top it up with some positive at the end. So the overall feeling is quite positive. They feel encouraged in the service, and they're willing to take up your suggestions for improvement. It's very, I guess you have to be strategic about it, otherwise people will just wind up feeling. And this is one of the things you find in so many service environments is how people are just, pointing out the other devotee's fault. It's not a comfortable thing when people start, because sometimes they're quite personal faults. They're not things you might be ready to accept. And you also have to see, is the person ready to digest this or not, or are they going to choke on it? And so giving feedback takes a bit of a skill. And even I remember, was it the last time we were in Bangladesh, one of the devotees who did the service of bathing and dressing the deities, he really didn't do well at all. But Murli Manohar's a gentleman, and the way he gave service was he said you did your best, and that was it. That's all he said. You did your best, because he made many mistakes. But if Murli had kept pointing out this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, like 25 minutes of mistakes, how would he have felt at the end of it? He would have felt very discouraged.
Devastated.
Yeah, possibly would have been devastated. He certainly would have been discouraged. So the idea is one is you want to get devotees to improve what they're doing, but the main point is they should feel encouraged, because if they're not encouraged, they won't improve, they'll give it up. And that's a really, really important point, especially for head pujaris to learn that skill of how to give good feedback. You agree? You're expert at giving feedback. We had that experience when Prabhu was in my book, very expert. Everyone felt very encouraged by his feedback.
I guess my question for feedback and trying to make corrections is, how do you do it? Like, if something that I find you're very good at, when I've witnessed, is, when there's something that's very, very serious that's happening with the deity, it can't just be like, well, I don't want to offend this person, because it can be a very serious situation.
Yeah.
So when I think trying to find that line of balancing, I want to encourage you in your service, but this also is not the right way that things should be done.
Yeah.
And if it is sort of not a detail, but a principle, or the protection of the deity, or something like that.
So how do you think you should respond to that? I know you're asking me, but how do you think you should respond?
Yeah, I mean,
Look at Prabhupada, the way he gave feedback to those. What was the sense they got from Prabhupada?
correct. I mean, I think it depends on the individual who is.
That's definitely one point of it. What did they get from Prabhupada though? What did they feel?
Encouraged.
Not only encouraged, they really felt like Prabhupada loved them. They felt like Prabhupada cared.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need to spend more time cultivating a relationship. And if we don't have a relationship, it might be just like, I'll give you an example. When I was doing the assessment, one of the assessments the other day in Bangladesh, one of the ladies there, she was chanting the mantras really quietly. But I could see her sensitivity. And so I felt that if I had said, can you chant them, you know what I'm like sometimes, I'm very straightforward with things. I was saying, can you chant them up a little bit more quietly? It might have made her have disrupted her service. So then what I did was I asked her friend, I just indicated friend, asked her to speak loudly, more loudly. And her friend did it, and she was fine with it because of the relationship they have. So sometimes, you know what it's like, if you don't have a good relationship with a person, and then you suggest to that person that they should do this, that's like, nah, that just doesn't work at all. They take offense, they're disturbed, and you know, and usually it just aggravates their false ego. It's like, I'm sure you've had the experience of like, you might have mentioned to someone, oh, Prabhu, you know, I don't want to say this, but you know, and I'm listening to your chanting, and I can't hear the Mahamani thing. What about your chanting? You know, it's like, I've had that happen, and so it just these experiences over the years helped me to see that relationship is a very important part of education. And so when I teach devotees, I really try to train, whatever you want to call it, you know, I really try to invest myself in that relationship so they feel that my interest is for their betterment in whatever way I can do it. I work out. I'm always trying to improve the lessons, etc. You know, and I take feedback. You know, and the thing is also, and you know this from my Paul, is not only do we need to be willing to give feedback, we also need to be willing to take feedback. You know? Because otherwise, it just becomes, you know, very sort of dictatorial, sort of coming, you know, descending kind of thing. Doesn't necessarily work so well. Is that okay? Yes, Mati.
Yes,
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you here. Thank you. Actually, the very last thing that you just said is something that's been in my mind, like in terms of being willing. There has to be, like, one is open, hopefully, to realize there's always something to learn. And that we don't know, we may think we know everything, but we really don't know everything. And in terms of what my question would be, there would be a standard. There is a standard.
Yeah.
And then, in order to correct someone or to bring it to their attention based on that standard,
Yeah.
so that it's not as though it shouldn't be taken as though the person who's correcting is not something personal, but it's just something that one is trying to stick with or adhere to the standard.
Well, there's different ways you can do that, and Prabhupada tells the story of instructing the daughter-in-law by instructing the daughter. You know, because there's a thing in India, it's like, I don't know if it's still the case, but it has been popular in India, or not popular, I wouldn't say it was popular, but a common thing in India, is that sometimes what happened is the mother-in-law would be very heavy instructing the daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law couldn't tolerate it, so she committed suicide. And so rather than doing that and getting into the situation of your daughter-in-law committing suicide, then they'll instruct the daughter in a really heavy way. And then the daughter, I'll tell you a funny story, right? Really funny story. I used to know this guy years ago. He passed away a few years back now. And he had a daughter he was raising. And he was a bit firm, I thought, in the way he was raising the child. So, as is common with children, they have strong, heavy parents. They went to bed. So, one day, they had a cat, and the cat passed water in the house. So he got the cat, he rubbed its nose in the urine. It was quite a common thing. I don't know if they do it here, but they do it in Australia. And it stops the cat from doing it because they get this tough love kind of thing. And so his daughter saw that and she thought, wow, I better not wet the bed anymore, he might do it to me too. So she stopped. So sometimes by instructing someone else, they'll see that and it'll correct the behavior without you having to be heavy with them.
Okay, thank you for that.
But you have to really look at the relationship. I think that's such an important thing, which is often overlooked in this country. Oh, they're doing it wrong, I have to chastise them. But generally doesn't work. And how many people have we lost through that kind of, that heavy-handed dealing? We have to be gentle because it's just like, you know, the analogy is given in the scriptures of the bhakti lata beach, and the lata, the creeper. So when the seed sprouts, it becomes a creeper. And in the beginning, it's got these two little leaves and this very, very delicate stem. And if an insect comes on and bites on the stem, finished. So in the beginning stage of devotional service, it's very delicate like that. And you have to protect the plant from things like, you know, like heaviness and stuff like that. So I think in the beginning stage of devotional service, we need to kind of mollycoddle people a little bit to just, you know, help get stronger in devotional service.
Thank you.
But not just, you know, okay, but then later on we can get heavy with them and sort of blow them out of the water. Because I have seen over the years that even senior Vaishnavas have led ISKCON because of the way they've been dealt with.
Thank you.
So the idea is to create a loving environment where everyone feels safe to express themselves. And also that the people were willing to hear instruction from others. Because our process is we hear instruction from others. And this is how we grow in devotional services. We hear the philosophy and we apply it. Just like, you know, one of the things that, you know, I personally want to keep emphasizing here again and again and again and again is cleanliness. It's so important in the process of bhakti. It's so important. You cannot make advancement unless you're clean. Plain and simple. You know, Prabhupada says this in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter, verses 8 to 12 of the purport. He says, he says, without cleanliness it's not possible to make spiritual advancement. Plain. You know? If you want to understand what Prabhupada meant by cleanliness, there's a series of talks given by Hari Sori Prabhu, who traveled with Prabhupada for about 18 months. You know? I think he had a lot of practical experience. He also was on the receiving end of Prabhupada's wrath sometimes with his lack of cleanliness. You know? Like one time, interesting story is Prabhupada was in Vrindavan and he was having, you know, his lunch, and he asked Hari Sori to get some salt. So Hari Sori went to the kitchen, which was some distance away, and brought back the salt. It took him whatever time it took. The next day Prabhupada asked for salt again, and then he brought it much quicker. And then Srila Prabhupada said, yesterday when I asked you for salt, it took you this amount of time. Today, when you brought some salt, because he brought the salt in a container, gave him the whole container. Yeah? He brought the salt, and it took you only a short amount of time. Why? Oh, because I saved some from yesterday. Prabhupada said, I'll let you. because it's uchista, it's been used, it's impure. And we don't, you know, and that's just one simple thing. You know, if we look at, you know, the whole concept of purity in Brahminical life, it means, like, you know, freshly washed clothes every day. You know, like, I mean, how many devotees wash their bead bag every day? You know, and the only time, like, yesterday I didn't wash the bead bag because I left the temple in Paris at 10 a.m. in the morning. It was raining, it wouldn't have dried, but I changed it. You know? So I had a dirty bead bag to wash. There's 2 bead bags on line now. You know, so you should wash your bead bag every day. You should shower at least daily, but a Brahmana should shower how many times? 3 times a day. It means you're changing your underwear 3 times a day as well. You don't like have a shower, put the same dirty underwear back on. You know? But even if you can't bathe 3 times a day, you should at least change your underwear. You know? But I know devotees, for instance, like Shiva Rama, Prabhupada also, they change their clothes 3 times a day. You can do that when you've got a servant. When you've got to wash your own clothes, it's a lot of work. But you know what I mean? It's like these are some elements of Brahminical culture. And also, you'll find when you practice the external elements of cleanliness, then the internal develops, and your heart becomes more and more pure. You cultivate the mode of goodness more and more. So, you know, purity is such an important thing, and wherever I go all over the world, and the one thing I see lacking everywhere I go is cleanliness. From very gross things, like dirty floors, dirty walls, dirty, you know, things like that, to, you know, dirty paraphernalia, like, you know, sorry for this, but, see? I mean, I don't think I've been to a temple, except Mayapur, where I can pull out the Nrsimha spoon from the cup, and it's not dirty. Yeah? And then the idea we're doing Nrsimha, we're going to sip water from a dirty spoon, and well, the cup's a little bit clean, but, you know, how are you going to purify your body with water that's coming from a spoon like that? So, it's, you know, there's so many elements of it, from the external to the internal. And we need to be actively cultivating all those elements of purity if we want to go back to Godhead. Because Prabhupada said, not possible to make spiritual advancement without purity, cleanliness. And the external drives the internal drives the external. They're symbiotic in their relationship. You can't have one unless you have the other. So I keep pushing this again and again and again. That's why I thought when I came here, maybe I should just bring buckets and mops and we can just all go and clean. I can show you how to clean. And you know, whenever I travel, I try to do that myself. You know, when we were here last time, Raj Mahan, Ruth, Meli Maharaj, and myself, we engaged in an all-day activity practically, cleaning the kitchen. These things are really important. You know, we had a whole lot of, you were helping to do that too, right, for some time. We took everything out of the kitchen, the ladies cleansed it all, and then Raj Mahan, Meli Maharaj, and myself, we cleaned all the walls, we cleaned the benches, the stove, everything like that. But this needs to, this is not something that should happen only when the deity minister comes to town. This should be happening every day. That everything in the temple is cleaned every day. Prabhupada, you listen to his lectures and he would say, the temple room should be shiny like a new pin. You know, cleanliness is just so underrated in ISKCON, and it's to our great detriment. Because, you know, if we don't cultivate cleanliness ourselves, we're not going to make spiritual advancement. Because spiritual advancement means cleansing the heart. But if you're living in a dirty environment, how do you clean the heart? You can't. You can't clean. Just like, you know, a room I stayed in recently, the temple president, he rang me up and said, I hope the room's clean. I was like, I felt like saying something, you know, but later on in 40 minutes, you know, when the time was right. But it's like there's all this like soot on the walls, and someone, you know, you got this like a flat paint, and you try to clean soot off a flat paint, just like smear it all over the walls basically, you know. And it's just, and I cleaned some of the window frame just to give him an A/B, like before or after example. You know, I got some cream cleanser, I cleaned some of the window frame just to show him the difference. So hopefully next time I go back there. But the thing is, like, I have to try and present this in a way that's not threatening to them. They don't feel like I'm challenging their position as a temple president or whatever. But somehow they just try to, and sometimes with some things I just let them go because I know that if I say something, then I probably won't be welcome back. And then I lose the effectiveness. You know, I have to, you know, in service you have to be able to, in any service you have to be able to maintain your effectiveness in that you want to be able to continue service and encourage people to improve. So sometimes it takes sensitivity, which coming from Australia I don't have very much of. The Australians are what are known as WYSIWYGs. You know what that means? WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get.
I got more. I have more.
Well, I'm willing to sit here to 1 o'clock.
Okay.
That's what you told me to do.
So, I just wondered if you could speak something on this like concept of the importance of specifically Srila Prabhupada's mode of worship and example also of worship compared to this idea. You know, oftentimes we'll hear, you know, justifications of, oh, but it's in Shastra, something else, not clearly Prabhupada's. Oh, but it's in Shastra, it's in Vrindavan they do, oh, in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya they do, contrasted
Yeah.
to clear
But we're not
picture.
Sri Vaishnavas. We're Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And if you look at the Sri Vaishnava worship, like, even though they don't have the concept of Sambandha Avideya Prayojana in Sri Vaishnavism, we do, that's our philosophy. Mahaprabhu said that the Veda contains nothing but Sambandha Avideya Prayojana. You look at our, you know, I mean, ultimately we all have the same Sambandha. We're all servants of Krishna. Prayojana is different. The Avideya determines the Prayojana. Or, sorry, the Prayojana determines the Avideya, but the Avideya leads you to, takes you to the Prayojana. So, if we look at our Abhidheya and their Abhidheya, their Prayojan and our Prayojan, you'll see they're different. So it's just like, we're sitting here in Brooklyn, right? If I want to go one suburb over, most likely I can walk. If I want to go into New York City, take the subway or a taxi or a car or whatever, I've walked it a few times, but it's a long walk, and you feel a bit tired afterwards. If I want to go to London, I'm not going to take a taxi. So the Prayojana determines the Abhidheya you use. So if you look at, for instance, the Sri Vaishnavas, they have a very different Prayojana. Their Prayojana is Vaikuntha. I mean, better than here for sure. There's no doubt that's better than here. But if you want to achieve the same goal which is given by acharyas, and it's not to say their Prayojana is wrong, but if you want to follow the path given by our acharyas, the Prayojana they're indicating is Brajmuni, Vrindavan. So if that's your goal, follow our Abhidheya. Because, Prabhupada wasn't just giving devotees a random selection of activities. Krishna wasn't in the Bhagavatam wasn't giving a random selection of activities. Neither have the acharyas given us a random selection of activities. They've given us very specific things in a very specific mood in order to achieve the prayojana of this path. So Prabhupada is really clearly pointed out. And again, this is where a lot of devotees get really mixed up in their practice of deity worship. He was very specific that our mood of worship is Aishwarya. But then the devotee said, but isn't our goal Vrindavan? That seems to be contradictory. But it's not if you look at the Sambandha. Where are we right now? We're in the material world, we're conditioned. Our mind and senses are just out of control. So in order to come to this purified state of awareness, of understanding who I am and what my relationship with Krishna is, we need to follow the rules and regulations of devotional service. Jiva Goswami points this out in the Bhakti Sandhara. And it's kind of interesting. There's a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where I think it's Lord Chaitanya is describing that actually the process of initiation is not actually necessary. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada quotes from Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandhara verses 283-284. And Jiva Goswami is saying that it's the opinion of the Bhagavatam that all these processes, such as hearing, chanting, not hearing, chanting, deity worship and all these different types of things are not actually necessary. But then he goes on to elaborate, as far as his experience, that those persons who approach him for initiation, their minds are disturbed, their senses disturbed by the coverings of the modes of nature. Therefore, at the time of initiation, they're obliged to engage in deity worship. So, devotees, and this is something that's kind of interesting, is devotees can present so many opinions, but that's all they are. And like, everyone's got an opinion, and what is it that makes your opinion better than mine? It's useless. Opinions are of not much value. I mean, if you want to ask, well, should we do a blue or should we do a green? Okay, that kind of opinion is okay. But when it talks about the practice of bhakti, about the process of devotional service, we don't consult opinions, we consult Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So, okay, we want to understand what's the mood of worship, what's the process of worship, what do our acharyas say about it, what's written in the scriptures about it. Not just ask someone's opinion. Like you ask me questions, I don't give my opinion. Or if I'm giving an opinion, I'll say, well, I don't really, there's no clear information, but I would do it like this. That's an opinion. And so you're free to do whatever you like with it. But when it comes to things like what's our mood of worship, acharyas are very clear about it. Shastra is very clear about it. And so there's no need to bother with opinions or things like that. I just want to back up a little bit to the point you were talking about. On our website, deityworship.com, oh sorry, not our website, on our YouTube channel, it's called Deity Worship Ministry. There's a whole lot of playlists, and one of the playlists is Prabhupada on cleanliness, or I think it's just cleanliness. And there's a series of lectures given by Hari Soripur. There's also one by Jamuna about Prabhupada standards of cleanliness. So if you want to learn about cleanliness, really eye-opening. It's like just amazing, all the detail that Prabhupada would get into it. And it helps us to understand, I mean, I've listened to it a few times, and I think maybe I should listen to it again, but it really helps us to understand what the kind of, the benchmark is, where we should be at with our cleanliness. Raj, you have another one?
That links into another connected topic of how do you, I guess you could say, regulate, or how do you balance intimacy with the deity, with like the strictures of rules and regulations, or in a sense the love and fear aspects. Like for some examples is like, oh, I can be late, I don't have to clean because Krishna understands I'm really tired and went to bed late last night, or I arrived late for the offering.
As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. At our stage of devotional service, there's no question of intimacy. You don't even know your identity. You don't even know your spiritual identity. How are we alluding to intimacy in a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It's just, the mind boggles.
Acharya Prabhu had a really good example that I always sticks in
Well, I can think of lots of examples, but yeah, go ahead with those examples.
You want to tell one about Panchatattva and breakfast offering?
I'll just,
It's really fun.
our dear friend Krishna Kanta Prabhu told me this story actually, was that, because
It was his birthday the other day, by the way.
Oh.
He would always do the 4 o'clock, there's so much service, but he was doing the Vaikalika offering, but the Vaikalika offering was always late, the fruit cut up was always late. So like, if you just get here 5 minutes earlier, oh, no problem, Panchatattva, they're my friends. So, this is what the kind of person would.
That indicates prema,
Yeah.
or at least a very, very advanced stage of devotional service, if we have that kind of relationship. But we don't. We're on the platform of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. We don't have that kind of. I remember one time having a similar discussion with Janani Vasaprabhu, and he was talking about exactly the same point. He said, there's no question of relationship at our level of advancement. There's no question of it. We just do the service, we follow the rules and regulations, we do the service.
The camera, sorry.
What's happening?
Just low battery.
We follow the rules and regulations, we do the service, we become purified.
Yeah.
When our heart is pure, there's that nice verse from Narottam Das Thakur, from, I think it's Gauranga Bholati Habe, when he's praying, like, when will that day come when my heart is purified, I'll be able to see Vrindavan. He's the third verse.
Even at that stage,
Vishayacharya
the Vaishnava is not changing his sadhana, even in that prem stage. Yeah?
Sorry?
Even in that prem stage, the Vaishnava outwardly is not giving up that sadhana bhakti.
No, because if he's so attached to serving Krishna, he's not going to give it up.
Yeah.
But just to assume, because, I mean, I wouldn't say that there was intimacy, I would use a different word, called familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
And familiarity is a very dangerous thing in relation
The
to
phrase
serving.
familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah, very, very dangerous. We should never assume that we have such a relationship with Krishna. Even you see, like, great personalities like Brahma, Shiva, Narada. And Prabhupada, in some places, he says that Brahma and Narada are practically on the same level as Krishna. And that's saying something. That's pretty extraordinary. Still, we see when Brahma comes to Krishna, and he's almost in the sense that, oh my dear Lord, please, da 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 da. He's like humble, praying. He knows his relationship. He knows who he is in relationship to God. So he's not a fool, that's for sure. But to think we have an intimate kind of relationship with Krishna's my friend, dangerous stuff. Really dangerous. He is the supreme well-wishing friend of all living entities, but we should understand the relationship is there. Dasa, dasa, and dasa. Thank you. Yeah. There's unlimited list of questions.
And another requested question is, so we hear that Grihastha devotees, especially like Grihastha Brahmanas, there's a very strong emphasis that they need to do deity worship. So one of the questions was, can you explain why?
There's an interesting purport in the 7th canto, chapter 5, text 23 and 24. You know, this Shalom Kirtan Vishnu Swanam verses. Prabhupada explaining Archer there, he says, the Grihastas must engage in deity worship from 4 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. at night, otherwise their fall down is positively assured. And actually Jiva Goswami explains that the Grihasta, deity worship is particularly meant for Grihastas. Because they're dealing, you know, like when something is a brahmacharya sannyasi, the idea is you're supposed to be constantly engaged in spiritual activities. You know, they do fire yagas, they do, you know, preaching, book distribution, whatever. You know, constantly engaged in spiritual activity. Whereas the Grihasta, by nature of the ashram they're living in, needs to interact a lot with material nature. You know, like, you know, you talk about working before. You know, so when you're going out and working, you're interacting with some pretty degraded people, yeah? And like, what do they talk about all day long? Sex life. You know, I was going to a camera club some years ago, and I was quite surprised, and I was a bit taken aback by it, because most of these people are in their 60s, etc. You know, they're quite elderly people, and they're just you know, thank you. They're just wannabes, you know. They're just all like talking about, oh, you know, just all this dreaming about sex life they never had, and wanted to have, and stuff like that. You know? That's pretty degrading, you know. I mean, I stopped going because I just couldn't really see that I was getting the benefit that I was looking for from it. So because the Grihastas are very much having to interact with that kind of energy all the time, not like they're getting involved and talking about themselves, that means they're associating with it, but because they're having to interact with that environment, they need some pretty powerful purification. And deity worship is very, very powerful purification. That's why, you know, in the temple worship, ideally, you create the environment where Grihastas have the facility to come and worship, come and do some, you know, maybe they're not, you know, full-time pujaris, but at least, you know, try to get them in every week or every fortnight where they're coming and doing some seva on the altar for Radha Govinda or Bodhisattva. And this will be very purifying for them. They may not be like full-time regular pujaris, but at least, I remember even as a Sankirtan devotee years ago, when I was in Melbourne, we would regularly, on the weekends particularly, because they have Bodhisattva deities, the brass Bodhisattva deities are about that tall, and so every morning 2 Brahmanas come on and they polish the deities, and they bathe with towels because they can't pour water on because they're so big. And then the devotees come on after that and dress them. So that was, for me, I found that a really purifying experience, especially going out and doing, you know, Sankirtan, you know, during the week. You know, we go traveling, and then we come back to the temple on the weekend. I found that very helpful to keep me sort of focused on the process. So very, very important process.
And then another balancing or like additional question is like, oh, you know, we're so busy, we have to work 9 to 5, and it's like stressful, and then coming home you have to cook for your family, and so then how can they practically devote time to come to the temple and do service? It's just
Yeah, every situation is different, and one thing I find as I get older is my capacity is diminishing. When I was younger, I could easily, you know, go 4 or 5 hours sleep, and I was fine with it. Now I feel devastated if I sleep 4 hours. And I woke up this morning after 3.5 hours. I felt really wrecked. You know, so you have to adjust according to your capacity. But even like simple things like okay, so maybe, you know, the greenhouse devotees, they don't have the capacity to come and dress the deities in the morning, which, you know, basically you're going from 5 a.m. till 7:30 p.m., 7:30 a.m., sorry, and then you have to go all the parallel way, so it's a long stint. But maybe they just come and they bring some fruit and vegetables or some flowers for the deities, you know. But, you know, cultivate this connection with the temple deities. Of course, they can have home worship, but Prabhupada didn't encourage that as much as he encouraged the temple worship. And his general tendency was to encourage devotees not to have these at home, unless they live a long way away from the temple, they couldn't come to the temple regularly. And of course, in some of these big cities, I know like in India, for instance, in cities like Delhi, to travel from some suburbs of Delhi to the center of the city takes an hour and a half or more, because the traffic is just so bad. The traffic here is not easy either, you know, it's like the streets are so congested. So, you know, in such an environment, they may have a reason for having these home, but then that means Sri Vigrahara Dana Nityananda Singana Tan Mandira Marjanada, this is Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur saying, means daily worship. Dressing every day, bathing every day, offering them food every day, cleaning the Mandira Marjanada, cleaning the altar every day. Not once a week or once a fortnight. And Prabhupada, he speaks very strongly about this in different places. Deity worship means daily, so if you can't do daily worship, don't have deities. Because it's not, you know, it's just like you follow any science. Cooking is a science. Right? If you have many cooks in? Okay. So you know how to make halva, right? How do you make halva? No, a bit more to it. You take a specific quantity of butter, a specific quantity of grains, right? You cook the grains slowly. If you want to cook them fast, you can do that, but it's not the same. Not the same. Because the grains tend to, especially on a hot thing, they seal up really fast and they don't absorb the water later on, so you wind up with kind of crunchy halva. So you cook it very slowly, and then it gets to the point where it starts to make a sound like wet sand swishing in a bucket. Yeah? That's when it's ready. Then you add, best is boiling hot water. You have to be careful because it tends to blow up on you. So you add the boiling hot water, and then you stir it till it starts to pull away from the side of the pot. Turn the flame off, put the lid on, leave it sit for a few minutes, and you have perfect halva every time. If you change the recipe, for instance, instead of salt, instead of sugar, you put salt, what do you wind up with? Upma. No, upma.
There's too much salt.
No? You put salt in there, it just becomes upma. So the thing is, you change the formula, you wind up with something different. So deity worship's the same. Our acharyas have given us clear instructions. Sri Vigrahara Dana Nityananda. Nitya means daily. So if you want to get the benefit of the deity worship, follow daily program. If you don't follow the rules and regulations of deity worship, as Prabhupada wrote in the letter to Shama Sundar, it's idolatry. And therefore, rather than getting the benefit, you get reactions for offensive worship. So, you know, it's a science. You follow the science, you get the benefit. Simple. If you can't follow the science, don't do it.
The last question I have.
I thought you had unlimited questions.
Well, I mean, I have more, but this is
She has one.
Well, this is just a very short one. It's from Divyangi. She's just asking, it's a very practical one.
Sorry?
It's a very practical one. Divyangi Mataji is asking about painting the deities, because she does that for her deities. She's asking, can I use a very light pen paper on brass and marble and wood deities? If not, how to remove scratches? I think she's meaning on the paint.
Now, sometimes deities get scratched by pins,
Or pins, yeah.
which is a very regrettable thing. There are deities in Islam that have practically no scratches on them. I mean, this gets back to the point really of training the pujaris. If the pujaris are properly trained, if we cultivate this sense that this, there's that story of the Brahmana, the Sakshi Gopal, and he had this conviction that the deity was directly Krishna. Therefore, if it's just like No, they don't do it these days. When I was a child, I used to do babysitting. And in those days, you used to use cloth nappies and safety pins and stuff like that. And so, when you put the nappies on, you were very careful about not sticking the baby with a pin. Because you know what would happen. The baby would bleed and all that sort of stuff, and you just cry and cry and cry, and then you have the crying baby to deal with. When the parents come home, they really give it to you. So, but the main reason you don't do it is because the child is a person. You don't want to cause the person pain. So, yeah, that's the first thing. Is don't scratch the needle to start with. As far as removing the scratches, I have heard of different devotees dealing with it in different ways, and I'm kind of reluctant to do it, but sometimes you don't have a choice. But the first thing is to stop scratching the deities. That's the first thing. In terms of painting the deities, in order for the paint to adhere properly, it is better if the surface is somewhat, roughed up to make the paint adhere. I mean, it's quite a common practice. But again, something I'm very reluctant about, because it's not like you're just sanding down a block of wood or something, you're sanding a person. So you have to be very careful about that. And the thing is also, say for instance with marble deities, if there are scratches on the marble deities, then you probably need to use something like about 1600 or 2000 grit, which is very fine. With the brass deities, we are rubbing abrasive on them every day. That's why the tea-light polishes, because it's very fine abrasive. It's like when you polish metal, you use what they call a cutting rouge, which is actually just a very, very fine abrasive. That's how you get the shine. That's how metal shines, it's through fine abrasive. Okay? Well, I mean, have a question.
So going back to the deity worship at home, is there any difference according to the type of deities that you have in terms of Radha, Krishna, Purnita, or Jagannath and Shavana and Mahadev? Is there different
Difference in
standards?
terms of ritual?
Standards.
Like in
Or
terms of the ritual you're offering?
Yes. Or the standards the same?
Like in a temple environment, then Radha Krishna, Prabhu says Radha Krishna is the ultimate pinnacle of deity worship. There's no scope for neglect. And so usually in a temple, daily bathing, morning and evening dressing, sometimes 3 times dressing a day, 6 offerings and artis, plus the puja bhoga, worship only done by Brahmins. Jagannath Subhadra would be 3 offerings and artis a day, Gauranga 2 offerings, 3 artis. Actually, Jagannath Subhadra would be 3 offerings, 4 artis. You don't need to switch them on. But in terms of the home standard, really what it means is like every day you should wake the deities, you should offer arti to the deities, at least Mangal arti, and you should bathe and dress them every day. In terms of food offerings, then whatever you eat at home should be offered to the deities. They shouldn't eat